So jumping right in, what I'm about to discuss in this video has the power to change the course of your entire life if you use this information properly. It changed my life forever. Everything, the trajectory, the peace I feel, the happiness, healing my fearful avoidant attachment style and becoming securely attached, finding my true purposes, living out my dreams, the way I see myself, how I was able to completely erase extreme pain points that I had, i.e., deeply embedded core wounds. And this is now one thing that I assist my clients in doing for themselves. And the knowledge that it starts with is understanding the mechanics of how trauma happens in the first place. Because if we understand how trauma happens in the first place, we can understand how to harness that knowledge and heal the trauma. And by trauma, I mean the effects on the mind and thus body, and this can be the effects of abuse, the effects of neglect, the effects of a tragedy, the effects of an accident. I'm talking about the negative effects, the core wounds that you acquire that really stick with you thereafter and affect the way you experience life and how you feel. Just understanding how events and relationships in your life wounded you is not enough. It's the important first step because we have to know what is there in order to heal it. And having understanding for some things, such as narcissistic abuse, helps us depersonalize it. But healing goes far beyond that, far deeper than that. Connecting the dots is important, but it is just scratching the surface. You connect the dots on the conscious level. You have to go to the place where the injury happened and directly heal the injury. In this case, that is the subconscious mind and the unconscious mind, but the subconscious mind is easier to access. The understanding part is the conscious mind, but the trauma is stored in the subconscious mind and unconscious mind. So we have to speak the language of the subconscious in order for new programs to form, not the language of the conscious mind. So, how does this all tie into healing insecure attachment styles? Well, when we have an insecure attachment style, either dismissive avoidant, fearful avoidant, sometimes known as disorganized, and sometimes known as anxious avoidant, or anxious preoccupied, we experienced trauma or neglect. Healing this trauma or neglect is a big part of healing your insecure attachment style and becoming securely attached. Well, if you're new here, welcome. And my name is Sarah Whaling, and I'm a certified coach specializing in helping people heal and reprogram their attachment style to become securely attached, identify and heal core wounds, heal from narcissistic abuse, and heal everyday pain points. Before I got my certifications, I had the personal experience of healing my own trauma and attachment style, which was fearful avoidant. So in this video, I'll be combining my personal experience and professional knowledge to deep dive into this topic. If you're looking for one-on-one assistance with any of the topics that I discuss in my videos, please visit my website and leave me a detailed message on the contact page. Okay, so now let's deep dive into this subject. The first thing I want to cover is why it's so important to go beyond simply understanding your trauma and or neglect. One of the most groundbreaking things you will ever learn is that your subconscious mind is what colors your entire view of the world. That's why you sometimes see people that consciously know that some of the limiting beliefs that they have, or sometimes they will say some of the worries that they have, seem unfounded, even to them, yet they still sit there and still are plagued by these thoughts and they emote to them and they suffer because of it. For example, someone with an abandonment wound might start having trauma thoughts that their partner is losing interest or moving on, or maybe, to put an anxious leaning, fearful avoidant twist on it, their subconscious has made this mean that their partner is cheating or ignoring them to talk to someone else. And you can hear the trust wound in that conclusion. They might realize that it doesn't make logical sense to jump to these thoughts, but they're feeling that intense sadness and despair of that abandonment wound or that pain of surely being betrayed. Now, of important note, many times you may be thinking that a core wound is completely logical, but that can be a secondary wound of, I am unsafe if I even consider otherwise, or I am unsafe if I work on this wound, but that can be reprogrammed and healed as well. But now, why can people think core wounds are illogical, yet get plagued by them anyway? We'll use this as an example to explain the mechanics of the mind. It is because the conscious mind cannot overpower the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind basically determines our experience of life itself, whether we have a positive self image or a negative self image, whether we achieve happiness and peace, or whether we're riddled with anxiety and feel depressed. Let me give you a few facts. It is estimated that only 5% of human brain activity is conscious versus 95% taking place subconsciously and unconsciously. Have you ever wondered why people do not stick to their New Year's resolution, for example? It's because people generally think that willpower, the conscious mind, is all it takes. But with extreme willpower, the conscious mind can only outwill the subconscious mind for an extremely small amount of time. And the scary part is, you might not even realize how you got where you ended up. Stating something consciously that is not aligned with our subconscious mind is a recipe for failure in the end. When we're talking about this subject, you can think of the mind as having three layers, and I'm going to go over with you an overview of each layer and what each layer equates to real quick. We can also look at the mind as a whole as one giant iceberg, with each layer getting bigger as we go beneath the surface, and that can also represent the power of each layer. Now, all these layers are part of a whole and connected, and we will get to that in a second. But you have the conscious mind, which is the tip of the iceberg, peeking out above the water. This illustrates very well that this is the part of the mind that is completely in your awareness, but amounts to such a small driver of our experience in life. If we go below the water, the next level, which is bigger and beneath the surface, it illustrates that it takes some effort to kind of go beneath and figure out what is there. This is the subconscious mind. And finally, the bottom of the iceberg, which is so deep that it can be unretrievable, is the unconscious mind. This is where something is so deep, so buried that maybe you come in contact with something and you have an automatic reaction. And when you do a little digging into your mind, you still can't really figure out why you're feeling this horrible way. Here's a random example of something buried in a person's unconscious. Maybe when you were a mere 2 years old, you went to a popular store with a parent and you got in trouble that day. Maybe the punishment was harsh. Today, as an adult, the store still exists. But today, as an adult, you have virtually no retrievable memory of the incident at the store when you were 2 years old. You just know that when you go to this certain store, you feel anxiety and you just feel awful about everything, but you can never figure out why. So maybe you have heard of Freud's iceberg analogy before. He actually calls the subconscious preconscious in it, but I think the iceberg analogy is a fantastic illustration. Important of note, you can still heal around things that you cannot remember. And how you do that is you work on things in your subconscious mind that are actually notable, because that eventually dips down into and gets programmed into the unconscious mind. You do nervous system work, which, why? Because the unconscious is showing up in our bodies as anxiety, depression, and emotions, not noticeable thoughts. And you make new associations to overcouplings. A quick definition of overcouplings. This is something that is linked to a traumatic experience in an inappropriate way, which the store is neutral, right? benign. We even go there to get things we want and we need. But in the example I gave, the store is associated with a lot of intense, horrible feelings. So let's talk about how trauma and neglect can leave lasting effects so we can set a foundation for understanding here on the work that we need to be doing to actually heal things. The brain has neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change and adapt its structure and function throughout life. This refers to the brain's ability to change, reorganize, or grow neural networks. So, how does trauma and neglect form maladaptive neural networks? Two things program or reprogram the mind: emotion and repetition. Really, at a base level, emotion is what does it, because one event that elicits really, really strong emotion can program something. For instance, someone lives through one catastrophic accident and they come away with the core wound, I am unsafe. Emotion and repetition are important, though, for hardwiring new beliefs in place of old ones. This is what fires and wires new neural pathways efficiently. And when we don't use old neural pathways anymore, they're able to atrophy. Let's talk short and sweet, real quick, about what the reprogramming process actually is. Let's look at the core wound, I am unsafe. We use imagery because that is how we bring on emotion and we repeat that. We look for evidence of the opposite of the core wound that we are reprogramming. We can do this for a set period of time in our day. 15 minutes is usually good if you're pressed for time. And preferably, we want to put some work into this daily for at least a few months. And then it's good to have some maintenance programs in place. Before we begin a reprogramming routine on any given day, we want to get in the prime brainwave state that makes us most suggestible, and that is how we reach the subconscious mind properly to speak to it in its language. And remember, the language of our subconscious mind is emotion and imagery, and we want to repeat this. We might know consciously that we aren't unsafe, but we need to explain that to our subconscious. An example of application would be taking note of the fact that, for example, for someone, they might have a roof over their head and have a nice, safe place to sleep every night. And it would be important to feel about it. Concentrate on what it feels like that you have these things in your life that make you safe. It is most efficient to get into as optimal of a brainwave state as you can for reprogramming, which is alpha and theta brainwaves. These are the brainwave states that hypnotherapists take their clients to. You are just achieving this by yourself. Naturally, right after we wake up or right before we fall asleep, we are in a good brainwave state for reprogramming work. But if these times do not work for you, you can still take yourself into this brainwave state by staring off into space for a bit, feeling your brain kind of fall asleep a little bit. I know for me personally, when I wake up has always been a terrible time to do reprogramming work because I have a lot of get up and go, and I have a lot to do when I first wake up. If you're in a state where it will elicit bad feelings, it definitely won't work. You just have to find what works for you, and that's very individual. If the only time that this feels good for you is midday during a walk, stare off into space for a little bit, go on a walk, and get in a rhythm and take a deep dive into your mind during that time. Another example of what works for many people is doing reprogramming routines right after a meditation session. Now, up until we are about 7 or 8 years old, our conscious mind is not fully developed. We're actually at that time of our lives walking around in brainwave states that are the prime brainwave states for programming, alpha and theta brainwaves. This makes us very suggestible. Now, what do you think that does when we experience childhood trauma? This is only one of a handful of reasons why childhood trauma gets ingrained into our brains so deeply. Through the course of time, if we don't know anything about how to actually heal, which most people don't because this stuff is very sadly not taught in school when we're children, These childhood wounds get hardwired more because until we reprogram, if we are living out these perceptions all the way into adulthood, we are firing and wiring them deeper into our brain. So, I really, really hope that this video has been valuable for you today to truly learn the mechanics of healing. Yes, this works for extremely deep core wounds that you could never imagine being free from. And I am speaking from experience on that one, being a former fearful avoidant. If you are interested in ongoing tips or assistance identifying core wounds or limiting beliefs, this is one thing I'm truly passionate about helping people do so that they can live a life free of pain and not be limited by experiences they've gone through. If this is you, I would love to hear from you. Please visit my website and send me a detailed message of what you're interested in working on, and you will be emailed my session information. Thank you for being here. Please give this video a like if it was helpful, and please share it with anyone you think could benefit from this. I'll be posting a lot more content like this video on the subconscious mind, along with a plethora of other subjects, including, of course, attachment style content. Thanks again.